There comes a moment in life when we realize that time is not as abundant as we once believed. We watch as the seasons change, as the years pass in the blink of an eye, and as those we love begin to slow down, their laughter quieter, their steps more measured. It is in these moments that we are reminded of a profound truth: nothing lasts forever. Yet, as humans, we resist this truth. We cling to the illusion of permanence, convincing ourselves that tomorrow is promised, that we will always have more time. But the tides do not wait. The sun does not linger in the sky, and just as all things rise, they too must fall. This is the law of impermanence, Anicca, as the Buddha taught. Everything is in motion, constantly changing, slipping through our grasp no matter how tightly we hold on. But what if, instead of resisting, we embraced this reality? What if, rather than fearing the inevitable, we turned our gaze toward presence, toward gratitude for each breath, each smile, each shared moment? What if, rather than dreading loss, we used our awareness to deepen our connections, to bring comfort, to ensure that those we love feel seen, cherished, and at peace? In today's discussion, we will uncover 5 quiet yet significant signs that may indicate an elderly loved one is approaching their final year of life. These signs are not warnings of doom, but invitations, opportunities to be more present, to offer deeper care, and to walk alongside them with wisdom and compassion. Through the lens of Buddhist philosophy, we will learn to recognize these transitions not as something to fear, but as sacred moments that call us to be fully here, fully awake, and fully alive in the time we have left together. Let us begin. Section 1. The Body's Whisper. Unintentional weight loss. One of the first and most telling signs that the body is preparing for its final transition is significant. Unintentional weight loss. At first it may be subtle. A belt that no longer fits quite the same, clothes that hang a little looser, a plate of food left untouched, more often than not. Families may dismiss it as part of aging, but in many cases, it is the body's quiet way of signaling that it is letting go. At its core, this change is a reflection of a deeper transformation. The body, once a vessel of strength and movement, begins to shift its priorities. Energy that was once used to sustain appetite, digestion, and metabolism is now redirected toward the essential functions needed for a peaceful transition. The body understands before we do. It prepares gently, subtly, yet unmistakably. This can be a difficult reality for families to accept. Watching someone who once enjoyed a hearty meal now push food around their plate or refuse it altogether. The instinct to encourage, to coax, to insist that they just eat a little more is strong. But in moments like these, wisdom lies not in resistance, but in acceptance. In Buddhist philosophy, suffering arises from attachment. The body, like everything in this world, is impermanent, a fleeting form that eventually dissolves back into nature. The Buddha himself spoke of this truth, teaching that clinging to what is bound to change only leads to pain. When we witness a loved one's body growing thinner, frailer, it is not a sign of failure. It is not something to battle against. Instead, it is a reminder to turn our focus away from what is fading and toward what remains: presence, love, and connection. Consider the story of an elderly monk named Thien, who had spent his life in devotion, teaching, and meditation. As he neared his final days, his disciples noticed how his robes seemed to hang on him, his once strong hands now delicate, his appetite nearly gone. One day, a young disciple approached him, troubled. "Master," he asked, "shouldn't we find ways to strengthen you? Perhaps a medicinal broth, something to restore your strength?" The old monk smiled gently. "Do you try to stop the river from flowing? Do you beg the leaves to hold onto the branches forever? No, my dear one. My body is like autumn's golden leaves, ready to return to the earth. Let it be as it is. In that moment, the young disciple understood. It was not about prolonging what was naturally unfolding, but about being fully present for it. He sat beside his master, offering not food, not solutions, but companionship. Together they drank warm tea, watching the setting sun paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. This is the heart of compassionate caregiving, not forcing, not fearing, but allowing. If eating becomes difficult, rather than insisting on large meals, we offer gentle nourishment, a warm sip of tea, a favorite fruit, a shared moment of quiet appreciation over a small bowl of soup. These small gestures carry immense weight. They say, I am here, I honor this moment. You are loved. In Buddhist practice, this is metta, loving kindness. It is not about fixing, but about being. It is the gentle touch on a frail hand, the peaceful silence of simply sitting together, the soft words that need no response. It is the understanding that the body is releasing what it no longer needs, making way for a different kind of journey, one not bound by form, but by the energy and love that transcends it. And so, when you see a loved one beginning to change in this way, pause, take a breath, release the urge to resist. Instead, ask yourself, how can I make this moment lighter for them? How can I bring comfort, not pressure? How can I let go of my own fear so that they too may find peace? This is the sacred lesson of impermanence. To love, not by holding on, but by letting go with grace. Section 2. The waning flame. Profound fatigue and weakness. Imagine a candle that has burned brightly for many years. Its flame flickers, not because it has failed, but because it has given so much of its light to the world. This is the nature of fatigue in the final stages of life. It is not mere tiredness, but a deep, unshakable exhaustion that no amount of rest can fully restore. There is a quiet surrender in this kind of fatigue, a wordless acknowledgement from the body that it is time to slow down. It is as if the body itself is whispering, I have carried you far, and now I must rest. But for those who love someone going through this transition, this change can feel unsettling. The vibrant energy they once knew, the laughter that filled the room, the hands that used to prepare meals, the feet that eagerly carried them to favorite places, now fades into longer pauses, heavier sighs, and a stillness that lingers. It is human nature to want to encourage them to push through it, to fight against the slowing down, but there is wisdom in allowing things to be as they are. In Buddhist thought, energy is a finite resource. Just as the body must conserve what remains, so too must we learn to let go of our expectations. A person nearing the end of their life may no longer have the strength to engage in the activities they once loved. Conversations may grow shorter, steps may become slower, and rest will be needed more frequently. It is not our role to resist this change or to push them beyond what feels natural. Instead, we honor their rhythm. We create space for stillness. We let them know that it is okay to rest. Consider the story of an old woman named May, who had spent decades tending to her family's garden. She knew every plant by heart, the ones that thrived in the sun, the ones that needed shade, the ones that required patience. Her hands, once strong enough to dig into the earth with ease, grew frail. The weeds she once pulled effortlessly now took great effort. Her family saw this, and out of love, tried to encourage her. Come, mother, they would say. Just a little walk, a little sunlight will make you feel better. But the more they pushed, the more she resisted. She did not need to walk anymore to love the garden. She only needed to sit beside it, to breathe in its scent, to listen to the rustling leaves. Her joy was no longer in doing, but in simply being. This is the wisdom we must carry when we see a loved one growing weary. Rather than resisting their fatigue, we must be like the river flowing with them, making their journey as gentle as possible. A Zen parable tells of a wise monk who once sat by a river, watching leaves drift upon the surface. When asked what he was doing, he simply replied, "I am learning from the river. It flows without resistance, and so must we." The river does not force its current, nor does it resist the passage of time. It simply moves forward, accepting the path laid before it. When a loved one grows weary, we too must learn to let go of resistance. Instead of urging them to keep moving, we must ask ourselves, how can we make their remaining time as peaceful as possible? Can we sit beside them in stillness, without the need to fill the silence with words? Can we provide warmth and reassurance, rather than expectations? Sometimes, the greatest gift we can give is not pushing them to stay as they once were, but embracing them as they are now. There is a beauty in slowness, the way the body eases into rest, the way the mind drifts between wakefulness and sleep, the way each breath becomes more intentional. If we learn to see this fatigue not as an ending, but as a transition, we will understand that there is no need for fear. There is only the gentle flow of time, guiding us all toward the next phase of existence. So when we see a loved one growing tired, let us not meet it with resistance. Let us not demand more from them than they have left to give. Instead, let us learn from the river, from the autumn leaves, from the stillness of a setting sun. Let us be present, let us be kind, and above all, let us be at peace with what is unfolding before us. Section 3. The mind's gentle departure. Cognitive changes and withdrawal. There may come a time when a loved one's thoughts seem to drift, when their mind no longer stays anchored to the present as it once did. Memory fades, familiar names slip away, conversations become fragmented. It is tempting to correct them, to remind them, to try to bring them back to clarity. But in doing so, we forget that they are already where they are meant to be. It is in these moments that time seems to stretch, becoming something fluid and uncertain. They may speak of people long gone, as if they had just left the room. They may call you by another name, mistaking you for someone from their past. Or they may fall into long silences, staring at a place beyond your sight, their eyes filled with something you cannot quite understand. This can be heartbreaking for those who remain fully present in this world, but from a Buddhist perspective, it is not something to be feared. The mind, like a river nearing the ocean, begins to flow in different directions, touching both the past and the unknown future. Buddhism teaches that clinging causes suffering, not only for ourselves but for others. If we demand that they stay fully present for us, we are not honoring the journey they are on. Instead of forcing connection in the way we are used to, we must meet them where they are. Speak softly, sit in silence. If words are too much, hold their hand. Let them exist in the space they need, without expectation. Consider the story of an old man named Haru, who had spent his entire life as a poet. His words once danced effortlessly across the page, capturing the beauty of cherry blossoms in spring, the weight of rain on autumn leaves. But as he aged, his mind began to slip away from him. He would forget the names of his own poems, forget the faces of his students, even forget the home he had lived in for decades. His daughter May struggled to accept this. Each time he became confused, she would gently correct him, trying to bring him back to reality. "No, father, you are at home, not in the temple. You wrote that poem last year, not yesterday." But the more she tried to hold him in the present, the more lost he seemed. One evening, she sat beside him as he stared out at the garden, a wistful look in his eyes. "Do you see them?" he whispered. The blossoms, they are everywhere. May looked around. It was winter. There were no blossoms, but she did not correct him this time. Instead, she smiled. "Yes, Father," she said softly. "They are beautiful." In that moment, she understood. He was not lost. He was simply walking a path that she could not yet see, and all she needed to do was walk beside him without trying to lead him back. In Buddhist tradition, there is a belief that as death nears, the consciousness begins its transition before the body does. This is not a loss, but a preparation. Rather than fearing it, we can offer gratitude for the moments of clarity that remain, and we can embrace the peace that comes with letting go. So how do we care for someone who is drifting between worlds? We listen, even when their words do not make sense. We reassure, even when they forget who we are. We accept, even when the person they once were seems to be fading away. And most of all, we love them, not as they were, but as they are, in this moment. There is a quiet beauty in this stage of life, if we allow ourselves to see it. Like a candle that flickers gently before it goes out, the mind moves in and out of the present, sometimes shining brightly, sometimes dimming. Rather than fighting against the darkness, we can choose to sit beside it, holding on to nothing but love. When the time comes, may we all have the grace to let go, just as cherry blossoms fall with the wind, effortless, natural, and without regret. Section 4. The body's surrender. Frequent infections and slow healing. As the body prepares for its final release, the immune system begins to falter. Small illnesses linger longer. Wounds take more time to heal, and infections become more frequent. These are not signs of failure. They are signs that the body is doing what it was always meant to do, returning to nature. It is the body's way of letting go, step by step, breath by breath, in the most unhurried, organic way possible. For those watching, it can feel cruel. This slow unraveling of someone who was once so strong, a simple cold that lingers for weeks, a scratch that turns into an infection, a bruise that never quite fades. These small things, once insignificant, now carry weight. But from a Buddhist perspective, there is a different way to see this process. It is not a tragedy, nor a battle lost. It is a transition, an unfolding of something as natural as the changing seasons. Just as autumn leaves wither and fall, making way for winter, the body too follows its own rhythm, releasing what it no longer needs. In Buddhist practice, we often reflect on the four elements: earth, water, fire, and air. The body, composed of these elements, gradually releases them as it prepares for its final moment. The warmth of fire dims, the body cools, circulation slows, energy fades. Water decreases, skin loses its moisture, hydration becomes more difficult, and the body retains less fluid. Earth begins to let go. The muscles weaken, the bones grow brittle, the physical form becomes lighter. And finally, air, the breath, the very essence of life, grows softer, shallower, preparing to dissolve into stillness. This is not something to fear. It is nature at work. Consider the story of an old fisherman named Tenzin. For decades, he lived by the sea, rising before dawn to cast his nets, feeling the salt air on his skin, reading the waves like a sacred text. He had always been strong, his hands calloused, his back sturdy, his steps sure. But as the years passed, his body changed. The cold began to bite at his bones in a way it never had before. Cuts from handling the nets no longer healed as quickly. One winter he caught a fever that would not break, and his strength never fully returned. His family, seeing this, urged him to rest. They brought him medicine, warm blankets, bowls of steaming soup. But he knew He understood in the quiet way that people who have spent their lives close to nature often do. He was returning, little by little, to the vastness from which he came. One evening, his grandson sat with him, troubled. "Grandfather, why does your body not fight harder? Why do you not resist?" Tenzin smiled, his weathered face calm. "Do you see the tide, my child? Does it fight to stay upon the shore, or does it flow back into the sea, as it has always done? The body is like the tide. It does not leave in haste. It does not struggle. It simply returns." This is the wisdom we must hold when we witness a loved one's body surrendering. It is not about fighting, but about flowing. It is not about holding on, but about allowing. Our role is not to resist this process, but to ease it. We offer comfort. We keep their hands warm, their lips moistened, their rest undisturbed. We honor the body, not by clinging to it, but by recognizing its sacred journey back to the earth. Yet for those who love deeply, this is not easy. There is an urge to fix, to mend, to search for one more cure, one more treatment, one more chance. We tell ourselves that if we just do enough, we can hold them here a little longer. But the truth is, this moment is not ours to control. The tide will return when it is ready. Our only task is to be present, to sit beside them, to whisper words of love, to make these final days as gentle as possible. There is a kind of peace in this surrender, if we allow ourselves to see it. It is in the slowing of the breath, the softness of the gaze, the quiet acceptance of what is. And when the time comes, when the last breath is drawn, it is not an end. It is a return, like a wave dissolving into the ocean, like a leaf floating to the ground, like the last ember fading into the night. May we all learn to let go with grace. May we all learn to see the beauty in the tide returning home. Section 5. The gentle breath. Changes in breathing and circulation. As the body reaches its final stage, the breath itself begins to change. It may grow slower, softer, with long pauses between each inhale and exhale. Circulation weakens, causing the hands and feet to grow cool to the touch. These signs are the body's way of gradually letting go, surrendering to the natural course of life. It is not abrupt, nor is it something to fear. It is a process as ancient and inevitable as the setting sun. For those witnessing this transition, these changes can stir an aching kind of helplessness. There is an instinct to fix, to intervene, to call out their name in hopes that their breath will strengthen, their skin will warm again. But deep down, we know, the tide does not turn backward. The river does not refuse to meet the sea. All things move toward their destined flow, and so does the breath, softening, spacing, releasing. In Buddhist teachings, the breath is the bridge between life and death, the thread that connects us to the present moment. It is said that our first act in this world is to inhale, and our last to exhale. Everything in between is simply the movement of air in and out, a rhythm that sustains us without demand, without resistance. And when the breath begins to change in those final days, it is not a loss, but a shift. Like a lantern flickering as the wind carries away its flame, its light not extinguished, but returning to the vastness of the universe. Consider the story of an elderly woman named Hana. For most of her life, she was known for her steady presence, her way of sitting quietly with others, making them feel heard even without words. As she grew older, she often spoke of the wind, how it whispered through the trees, how it carried messages across the fields. The wind and the breath are the same, she would say. Both come and go on their own time. We do not own them, nor do we control them. One evening, her granddaughter sat by her bedside, listening as her breath became lighter, the pauses between inhales growing longer. She felt a lump rise in her throat. "Grandmother," she whispered, "should I do something? Should I call someone? Hana, with what little strength she had left, gave a small smile. No, child, just sit with me. Breathe with me. And so she did. She matched her own breath to her grandmother's, slow and gentle, until she no longer felt afraid, until she understood that she was not losing her. She was simply accompanying her as she crossed into a place beyond words. This is the greatest gift we can offer in those final moments. Presence, not action, not urgency, just presence. To sit beside them, to breathe with them, to offer calm reassurance, not through pleading, nor through desperation, but through the quiet strength of simply being there. When the breath shallows and the hands grow cold, it is not a battle lost. It is not something broken that needs fixing. It is the body preparing for its final release. The same way the moon gently slips beneath the horizon, the same way the waves retreat from the shore, only to rise again elsewhere. In that moment, there is nothing to do but be. Hold their hand, speak softly. Let them know they are safe. And when the last breath comes, when the space between inhales stretches into silence, do not think of it as an ending. Think of it as a return. Just as the wind never truly disappears, just as a wave does not cease, but becomes part of something greater, so too does the breath. It carries them forward into whatever lies beyond, into the infinite embrace of the universe. So let us not fear these changes. Let us not resist them. Instead, let us meet them with tenderness, with grace, with the understanding that every breath, whether it is the first, the 100th, or the last, is a sacred thing. Conclusion: the final gift, presence, love, and letting go. In the end, what truly matters is not how many days we are given, but how deeply we live within them. It is not the number of breaths we take, but the presence we bring to each inhale, each exhale, each moment shared with those we love. The greatest gift we can offer to someone in their final days is not an attempt to change what is inevitable, nor a desperate wish to turn back time. It is the gift of being there fully, without resistance, without fear, to sit in stillness beside them, without the need to fill the silence, to hold their hand, knowing that words are not always necessary, to listen, not just with our ears, but with our hearts, to the stories they share, to the spaces between their words, to the quiet presence that exists, even when voices fade. Letting go is never easy, but it is not meant to be a sorrowful surrender. In Buddhism, we learn that attachment is what creates suffering, but love, in its purest form, is not about holding on. It is about freeing, about allowing, about trusting the natural course of life. Just as the river flows effortlessly toward the ocean, just as the autumn leaf drifts gently from the branch, so too must we learn to release with grace, with love, with peace. When the moment comes, when the final breath is drawn and the body rests at last, may we not dwell in grief alone, but in gratitude. Gratitude for the time we had, for the laughter shared, for the lessons they leave behind. May we honor them, not just in memory, but in the way we continue to live, with kindness, with awareness, with deep appreciation for the fleeting, precious nature of life itself. And so, as you walk this path, whether now or in the distant future, may you find the courage to be fully present, to embrace each moment, each breath, with an open heart. And when the time comes to say goodbye, may you do so not with regret, but with the quiet knowing that love never truly fades. It simply takes a new form, carried forward in every act of compassion, in every gentle whisper of remembrance. If this message has resonated with you, if it has offered even a sliver of comfort or clarity, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Here we explore life's deepest truths through the lens of Buddhist wisdom, finding peace in impermanence, strength in stillness, and meaning in every passing moment. Let us continue this journey together, mindfully, lovingly, and always with presence.